simple is the goal, right? Simple, but not simplistic. You know, like if your theme is, that's not exactly profound. It is simple, but it's perhaps simplistic. So the goal is always to make something that can capture the spirit of what you're after in as little as possible.
Right.
So this is where we kind of ended up. Not much to it. It's very kind of gothic, you know?
Yeah.
Because then you can get very, you know. That sort of, you know, just have fun with it. But something very simple and kind of sad. The story involves a girl who's an orphan in her early 20s who has this traumatic memory of discovering her father's murdered body. And then the very opening of the game, someone mails her a severed hand, and the police show up and say, we think this is actually connected to the never solved murder of your father. And she gets pulled into this dark world as they try to figure out what's going on. And so it has to be like fragile and delicate, but in a world of kind of intrigue, you know. So that's how we were hoping to get that across, you know. So, with that said, I will now pivot and show you how that actually manifested.
Yeah.
And we'll see.
All right, let's go over to the computer.
So here, I will play the theme, and I can kind of, well, what do you think? What would you prefer? Do you want me to just play and then dissect, or kind of like give a few little pre-play dissections and then play it down? Or none of those options?
I mean, so we heard it on the piano. Would it be, I guess we could just kind of refresh it maybe now here in this setting? I don't know. What do you think would be the best way to present it?
I think, well, why don't I walk through the elements?
Okay. I mean, I'll leave it up to you, whatever you think is the best way to present it. So we heard you kind of played in its organic form right on the piano.
Yep. Very simple. You know, it's kind of slightly waltzy. And so, as I can never seem to resist, the score is built in many respects around Tina Guo cello solos.
How can it not?
But yeah, that's kind of, at this point, I don't really know how to write a score without her. But so I can isolate here, and you can hear the theme at first presented, you know, that way. So, makes sense. One of the things is they were always really quite adamant, Jack particularly, that it be sufficiently dark and heavy, but also, like so many people, and rightfully so, he really just loves the texture of strings. And so I said, you know, we can do a traditional string orchestra, and in fact this starts off with this big sort of glissando gesture for all the violins, where they kind of. So, you know, we kind of announced the orchestra on beat one, bar one, but I did a separate recording in Nashville of all basses as well, because I wanted there to be, you know, if we have the strings up here doing these kind of, you know, lush, again, like kind of gothic harmonies. Down here, you could have like 5- and 6-part chords, you know. In an ensemble of all basses. So that's sort of one of the first things you hear is this, all the pizzes of this bass group in Nashville. And then they start playing these chords below the cello. So we're, no violas, violins, cellos, just basses. Which was really fun. That becomes a really important color all through the whole thing. And then there's other little bits and bops. We've got some lots and lots of textural kind of almost Renaissance-y things, bowed guitar and things like that I love to just feather in there. But lots of saxophone in this score, and usually doing things like this. Always tucked behind something. It's like the subtle suggestion of the noir, but without going.
It's not full-blown noir.
Because it's not a noir piece, but we can suggest it a touch, and then Caroline Campbell also with these just beautiful. She's a superb violinist. So we hear her on the theme, And that's where we also then finally have the strings come in. Makes sense, right? And then, of course, there's little electronics and backgroundy kind of support, the normal. Nothing too wildly avant-garde. That's choir samples. I didn't record real choir because I didn't need. It's just a few places where they're heavily affected, very kind of manipulated. So
there's something about kind of sampled choirs that have its own. I don't know, its own thing. It
becomes its own instrument.
Yeah, it's its own instrument. It's not, not better or worse than a regular choir. It's like its own thing.
It depends on what you want to do with it. But in this case, because it was basically an extension of the electronic textures, and it's not that much in the score anyway. So it was I couldn't really make the case for lobbying for a choir budget. It's not a choral score. It's just one of those little ingredients that kind of makes you think, oh, that sort of sounds like a choir, but it's never really in the front. So. Mm-hmm. With those little glimpses, here's how it all plays out. And actually what I can maybe do is shift this to the piano roll. Pretty simple.
I mean, it's beautiful.
It's not going for anything wildly controversial. So, anyway, that's kind of the idea on the theme, and hopefully that made some sense. Hopefully that was somewhat interesting. Look under the hood. It's one of the things that for me was always encouraging. First time I ever kind of got to see this stuff was to realize that some of my favorite music, when peeling back the layers, you realize it's not piles and piles of complexity. It always seemed like it ought to be, but then when you actually have a look at it, you think, well, hell, that's not that complicated.